right in. I am Mohamad and I'm a part of Financial Literacy for Youths Malaysia, which is an NGO started by two students from LSC all the way back in 2016. And we are now 7 years strong, and we do two main things. The first is host events, and the second is create content like this podcast with the singular goal of empowering youths with financial literacy through the education of finance, economics, and investment. So, financial literacy, from what I understand, is an issue that is quite close to you. In 2019, you officiated the launch of Malaysia's the National Strategy for Financial Education, 2019 to 2023. And a lot of people welcome this because it answered the question. A lot of people always say, why isn't the government doing more to promote financial education among Malaysians? And the setting up of the FEN network was a welcome thing to everyone. So the first question I have for you is, do you remember how this strategy came about?
Well, money plays a big role in the life of any person or any society. So you need to understand what is the role of money. It's not just for exchanging money for goods or services. Money also becomes capital for investment. And that is very important. If you don't understand how to invest money, you will never earn money for yourself. So everybody should know how money functions. And most people, in fact, do not know. They only use money to exchange for goods or services. That is why education in finance becomes extremely important.
So going off on that, what is the best financial advice that you would share to our audience who mostly make up of youths?
Yes, money, as I explained, is not just for exchanging for things. It is also for making more money for yourself. If you know how to use money as capital, then you can earn money from money. The way you place money, the way you invest money, you may buy shares, you may buy goods which appreciate in value, you may save. There are lots of things that you can do with money which will be beneficial to you. So that is why understanding finance becomes important to every individual and every community.
But let's say to the ordinary Malaysians, would you tell them maybe to invest in ASNB or something like that? Is that something you feel strongly about?
Well, we created funds to enable people who do not understand the stock exchange, for example. What do you do with stock exchange? You want to put money in, you don't know which business you should put your money in. But you have a fund that almost guarantees that you have a return. The fund will do the investment. So what you do is you put your money in the fund, like PNB, for example, then PNB will invest the money, earn an income, and that income is given to you based on how much money you have invested. So money by itself depreciates in value over time. So if you save money and not invest it, you are going to lose the value. So don't save money just as money, but money that is saved must be invested, or at least it must be used to buy something that will appreciate in value over time. For example, gold.
Okay, so I never thought I would get financial advice from Tun Mahathir, but Tun Mahathir is bullish on gold and PNB. So now that we've covered financial literacy, I want to focus on the youth, right? And people may not know this, but you are young ones. And not only were you young, but you were a youth activist. You made posters back in your student days. You engaged with youth groups across Malaysia. And you also wrote newspaper columns in the New Straits Times during your student days. So it's been a while since the 1940s. many Malaysians maybe don't know their history well. So can you paint a picture for those who don't know? What motivated you to engage with politics as a youth? What was it about the independence movement that awakened something within you?
Well, I lived during the period where Malaysia was under foreign rule. Basically, the British ruled Malaysia. And then, of course, the British lost to Japanese. And subsequently, the Japanese transferred the state of Kerala to Thailand. And then the British came back. So we welcomed the return of the British, thinking that they will continue with the agreement with the Malay states. That is the agreement to advise the state on the administration of the state. But instead of that, the British decided to take over the whole country, literally to conquer the country and make it into a single unit, dismiss all the rulers and rule it as a British colony. Of course, we resented that because Malaya was our country, and we feel that the British were trying to just take over our country. So I became interested in defending Malaysia. I thought that it is wrong for the British to colonize Malaysia. And that's how my involvement in politics began.
Is that why you like Star Wars? Because it's about the Empire, the rebels working against the Empire. Okay, I think I've gained some insights into Tun Mahathir. The next thing I want to ask you is your perspective on failure. This is something everyone faces in their daily life, but I think as a society, we sort of celebrate successes, but don't really talk about the challenges and hardships, right? So when we talk about youths, perhaps they didn't get the job they wanted or an exam didn't go so well. And you've had your fair share of setbacks that people might not know of. So the first thing is you wanted to study law, but instead were given the scholarship to study medicine. You have lost party elections in 1970 and general elections in 1969, and your political career had a huge setback in 1969, I think, when you were expelled from UMNO. So can you share, how did you personally deal with failure, but more importantly, how do you come back from that?
Well, I feel that in the course of your, activity, there are times where you fail, there are times where you recover. So when you fail, you should try to recover as quickly as possible to do what you intend to do. So when in school, I never failed any exam, but in the medical college, my final year, I failed in obstetrics and gynecology. So I had to stay back for 6 months. Well, for that 6 months, I studied hard to make sure that I would get through obstetrics and gynecology and qualify as a doctor. So when you fall, get up and fight the same fight to achieve what you set out to achieve. So that is a very important thing. There are some people, when they fail, they give up. They feel that, it's not worthwhile striving anymore. It's not worthwhile trying to get what you intended to do. But for me, I accept that in life, there will be times where you fail and times when you succeed. And when you fail, you have to get up and fight harder in order to succeed.
Is there one failure that you have experienced that was the hardest to come back from, you feel? One that you were like, oh, this really hurts, it's hard to even wake up in the morning, that sort of thing.
Well, I was expelled from the party by the Tunku because I criticized him. But I was hopeful that one day I would come back. And indeed, the Tunku resigned and Tun Razak took over. I was quite friendly with Tun Razak, and he allowed me to return. That is unusual because when Aziz Ishak, a minister in Tunku's government, he was sacked from the party and he never made a comeback. He tried to contest again, but he failed.
So moving on from that, let's talk about your comeback. You know, you mentioned Tun Razak, you had this exponential climb up the political ladder, so to speak, all the way to the highest office. And you also mentioned the support from your grassroots, right? You had, especially after you had written your book, The Malay Dilemma, you also won the most votes in a Supreme Council election. So why do you think they like you? You know, why did you have such strong grassroots support, especially from a non-royal? Also, you had bottom-up support, but you also had support from the top. And you mentioned that Tun Razak, your words was that he was your political salvation. And a lot of people saw you as his blue-eyed boy, and he had a tendency to favor you. So I am curious, why do you think he took such a liking to you? That's the first one. And are there any lessons that you think our audiences would find useful when wanting to stand out to their superiors?
When I was a member of parliament between 64 and 69, I made speeches, of course, in parliament. I made speeches outside parliament. And this helped people to notice what I stood for. So Razak realized that what I said was in keeping with what he thinks. And I think he felt that I would carry forward his ideas. So Razak, of course, had a lot of young people quite friendly to him. Dola Aman, Wahab and all that. So these few people were close to him because he has a tendency to move with the young people at that time. And I was in that young people's group, and we got to know him very well. And I suppose he agreed with what I said and what I intended to do.
Do you think you worked harder than everyone else in cabinet, or?
I was not a member of cabinet at that time, but later on I was a member of cabinet, and I took interest. You know, in cabinet we have different portfolios. Most people only look at their own portfolio, not other subjects. But I like to read everything, other people's ministries and what they are doing. And during cabinet meeting, I pass comments, and I suppose the comments were relevant to the subject, and I think people realize that I read all the cabinet papers, and I have some ideas on them which I voice during cabinet meetings.
Okay, so the advice is if you want to impress your boss, just go the extra mile, I think. Be hard and work a lot. And the next thing is, when we talk about politics, you are what's been characterized as a political survivor. I'm thinking about how during your 22 years, during your first premiership, you were able to survive many challenges. And, not everyone is going to have to go through huge party elections as you've had, but we are going to go into the workplace. And in the workplace, there will be office politics, right? There are ladders to climb and structures to navigate. So is that something you find very important to coming out on top?
Yes, I think when you are working, you have subordinates, people working for you. And it is good for you to be able to get along with your staff. So I do not sack people or do something like that. In fact, most of my staff stayed with me for years and years. I still have some of the staff who worked with me when I was Prime Minister. Until now, they are still with me. I get along with them and they deliver because I have faith in them. And if they go wrong, I explain to them where they go wrong. So I always believe that you should not very quickly get rid of your staff simply because they did something that is not to your liking. You have to correct them, and you have to be sensitive to their feelings as well. So when I was as a member of parliament, as well as a minister, and then prime minister, I get along well with my staff, and they delivered.
But also, when we talk a lot about politics, there's the policy aspect. When you're in government, you're actually putting forth things to make Malaysia better. But there's also that other side of party politics, right? Where you have to sort of play the game. And in engaging in party politics, you sort of lose allies. People that you thought were your friends now became your enemies. And one thing that was striking in your book is you mentioned how, I think he was the MB of Selangor, Harun Idris. He brought you into UMNO, as you say, but then later he turned against you. And then even in 2020, your party sort of, also not to say backstab, okay, let's use the word, maybe backstab, rejected, whatever you want to call it. I get a bit of sadness from you from reading, especially the last chapter of Capturing Hope. So do you ever feel, or do you ever reflect on the friends that you've lost as a result of participating in politics, or is it never personal and just business?
Yeah, no one person can be liked by everybody. You always have some people who do not like you. In fact, when I was chosen as a deputy prime minister, there were a lot of people who wanted to be the deputy prime minister who did not get it, and they felt that I was the wrong choice. So there is that kind of antagonism towards me. I had to deal with them. I have to work with them. I don't want to find them spending their time attacking me, but I have to find a modus operandi with them. Can they be more supportive than at that time? And I find that when you make people your enemy, then you become their enemy. You see, so it's better not to make people your enemy, but to get along. That is why, for example, when Musa and Tunku Razali contested for the deputy post, I did not support either Musa or Tunku Razali because I couldn't know who is going to win. If I support Musa and Razali wins, I will have a bad time with Razali. So the best thing is to stay away and let them fight. Whoever wins, I can get along with them.
I think that's something quite extraordinary. A lot of people talk about Pakatan Harapan, but the thing to me that was inspiring is sort of being able to cross the aisle again and work with people that were once people that you sort of vilified or fought against, but everyone at the end of the day was, holding hands and sort of trying to make Malaysia better. Okay, and the next thing I want to touch on is I call this Soalan Merepek a bit like a bit more fun questions, a bit just things maybe some people have wondered. So I'm not going to use the word mega project because apparently you don't like that word. So I will say landmark instead. Is there a landmark during your time as Prime Minister that you are most proud of? Is it KLCC, Putrajaya, or the North-South Expressway?
Well, I would say that Putrajaya is something that the country benefits even now. At the time when we decided to move all government offices to one place, at that time already Kuala Lumpur was overcrowded, traffic jams, and in those days you can't ring each other the way you ring. We have Zoom and all that. In those days, no. You have to travel from one office to another to meet your counterpart. So because of the traffic jam, movement and contacts became very difficult. But if we place all the ministry in one place, then they can walk across to the other ministries. So we decided that we should have not a change of capital, but a change of administrative capital. So Putrajaya is only an administrative capital. And since it's setting up, contact between ministries have become much easier, and it's easy to call for a meeting. For example, you don't have to cross the whole city to go to your meeting place. And there are many other convenient things.
But I would say KLCC has Kinokuniya. So that makes it slightly better. But also, is your favorite food tempura? Because when I was reading your book, there are like 2 pages about your appreciation for how the Japanese chef cooks the tempura. Is that your favorite food?
Yes, it's one of the food that I like best. Of course, there are other food which also I also like. But tempura is a special dish with the Japanese, and it is cooked in a special way that shows the attention paid to presentation of the food.
I mean, Tula is like something as simple as frying something, right? But the meticulousness of how they do it is very impressive. So I think I'm very conscious of timing because you're always on time and want to finish on time. So I have one last question for you. So my observation on your most admirable trait is your conviction, right? So in many ways, this was sort of the drive needed to industrialize rapidly for Malaysia, and the reason for many successes like the dawn rate and the capital controls during the financial crisis. So there are some things that also have gone wrong, or policies that may not have worked out so well, right? Like a big effect of centralization is that a lot of states are left behind, and part of low wages can be attributed maybe to the strength of big business, right? But you have no regrets, and your admirers and your critics would agree on one thing, is that you acted in the belief that you did the right thing. So where do you think your confidence and conviction comes from?
Well, I read a lot, not only books, of course, the news coverage of other countries, problems of other countries. I also visited many countries. I observe what they are doing, which is right, what they're doing, which is wrong. So I learn a lot from my reading, from my travels, etc. And I use that knowledge to design the policy for the country. And I find that anything that you propose, you will have people who are for it and people who are against it. And the arguments will, if you go by the arguments they put, you will not do anything. But you have to make a decision. As a leader, you have to make a decision. For example, when we decided to build Putrajaya, of course, lots of people say it's a waste of money, it's a waste of time, that's not necessary and all that. And there are some say, oh, we must do this, this is absolutely necessary. So as a leader, you have to make a choice. And I made the choice to have Putrajaya.
So just make the decisions, and do you usually work on it after it happens? So it's better to make a decision rather than think about it for too long. Would you say that?
All decisions are wrong and all decisions are right. So you, along the way, you are going to meet with wrong things. Well, you have to make correction. If you are doing the right thing, go ahead. But if you have done something wrong, be brave enough to say that, look, this is wrong. I must change. So you change. It's not something that is carved in stone that cannot be changed. You can change as we go along.
Okay. And we have 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to end on this. But thank you so much for your time today, giving up your morning to talk to us. I would say that creating a developed nation is not easy. according to the IMF, there are 152 countries still developing. So if there was a recipe book on how to develop properly, there would be no need to study economics anymore lah. So yeah, when we talk about your contributions and your conviction is that you came from a place of wanting nothing but the best for Malaysia and to sort of stand out globally and something that we can be proud of internationally lah. So terima kasih to you, Tun, and all the best with your rest of your day lah.
Thank you.
Hello and hi, I hope you've enjoyed the show thus far. So, what you just saw was an edited version of the 45 minutes that we had with Tun. So, we wanted to first post a more focused version covering his life and financial literacy and the youth. So what you're going to see next is, when you have the opportunity to talk to Tun Mahathir, it's not every day that you get to talk to Tun Mahathir, so there were a few questions that we were curious about. So I touch on that these questions are more political in nature. These questions do get a bit heavy with the topic. So what we have here is a discussion on East Malaysia development. We discuss education. We discuss money politics. We discuss amendments to the 1971 Colleges Act, and we also have a question about the current Prime Minister, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim. So we thought it'd be best to just release it and share it with our audience. I would also add that there is still an uncut version, and if this podcast gets 10,000 views on YouTube and Spotify, we'll release the full uncut 46-minute interview. And there are some gems in there. So, yeah, if you enjoyed it thus far, thank you. Share it with friends and hope you enjoy the rest of our discussion with Tun.
Talk a bit about redistribution. So, for example, with the Malaysian development and us being a key global player in semiconductors and gloves, a caveat with this centralization is that a lot of states are left behind. So, for example, in Malaysia, the median income is 5.8k, but only 7 out of 13 of states in Malaysia reach this median income or exceed it. And for example, Sabah, my own hometown, only has a median income of 4.2k. So, in your opinion, Tun, how do you think we could move forward in ensuring all of Malaysia does not get left behind? So, right now I'm asking about state allocation. So, for example, when the federal government determines how much to give to Sabah and Sarawak for infrastructure, for example.
Yeah, based on needs, also based on population. You see, if the population is big, naturally you have to give more. And if the country is big and has lots to do, you have to allocate more funds. But in addition to that, the federal government also must undertake certain projects in the state, and that helps the state. For example, if for Kedah, for example, you cannot give Kedah the same amount of money as you give to Sabah, because Kedah is a small state. But if you want to build an airport in Kedah, the state couldn't afford. So that is a federal responsibility. So not only do you give money to the state, but also you have to have projects in the state by the federal government.
So one more question just on the same topic is, in your opinion, Tun, do you think that the budget allocation to Sabah and Sarawak are fair?
Well, you must remember that when Sabah Sarawak joined Malaysia, they were very poor. They were very poor, actually. And at that stage, of course, a lot of the development funds came from the federal government. But now, both Sabah and Sarawak are very rich. For example, Sarawak's budget is 11 billion ringgit. Whereas budget for Kedah is 700 million ringgit. So obviously, Sarawak has got more money, Kedah has got less money. You have to balance that. You have to give more to Kedah than you give to Sarawak. But even then, because of Sarawak's contribution and also ability to earn money by themselves, the amount should be, we should study the amount that should be given to each state. But there is already an allowance based on population.
So I think now shifting gears, another issue that's close to your heart is education. And Jasin has a few questions on education for you.
2019 survey from the Department of Statistics have shown that around 70% of SPM Leavers, they do not wish to further their studies. So as a former education minister, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the education ministry is perhaps the biggest ministry because there are hundreds of thousands of teachers and you have schools all over the country. You have to provide for the schools. So education ministry is a very big ministry and any amount that you give would not be enough because already it is getting more than what other ministries get. So invariably, there will be some unfortunate schools which may not get the money that they are entitled to. But the thing about the government is that we spend more money on education than we spend on the armed forces. Most countries, they spend more money on arms, on the military, than on education. But in Malaysia, we spend more money on education than on other ministries. So that's how important education is to us. But whatever we spend, the demand would exceed the capacity of the government to finance. Our only way is, of course, to enrich the country, make the country well off, and the government can collect more taxes and have more money to spend, and a lot of that money will go to the Ministry of Education.
Okay, so Tun, looking forward, is there anything with regards to education that you think the new government should prioritize for the betterment of our students?
Well, you see, the way you teach people changes with the times. You see, initially, teaching is verbal. The teacher talks to the student and tells the student whatever knowledge that he wants to pass on to the student. But after that, they came books. Books were printed. That helps education. But today we have modern technology. The most important thing about the modern technology is the ability to record things and play back many times. You can record the lesson. For example, we have a lot of teachers, but some are good, some are bad. If you get a good teacher, the school does well. But if you get a bad teacher, the school does not do well. So what you can do is, if you select the best teacher and he or she gives a lesson in a class which is recorded, then that record can be played throughout the whole country. So the whole country will be taught by the best teacher. But we are not using modern technology in teaching. We are still concentrating on the teacher in the class. But the teacher in the class, some teachers are good, some teachers are bad, and the student will suffer.
Do you think do you agree with this statement? There are no bad students, only bad teachers. Would you agree with that or disagree?
Almost true, but sometimes, of course, the students are bad.
Okay, and the next thing I want to touch on is but okay, I am going to grill you a bit on one aspect. I want to kacau you sikit lah on this. I know that you have no regrets about implementing and amending the University Colleges Act in 1975. You've talked about it in your book that you had to restore order and stability to education. But just on a personal level, do you think Youth Mahathir would have appreciated that amendment, if that question makes sense?
Well, I was involved in politics, and subsequently I was given a scholarship to study medicine in Singapore. And during the time when I was studying medicine, I did not get involved in politics at all. I left it to the other people. They were involved in setting up UMNO and the like. I thought that my first duty was to make use of the scholarship to qualify as a doctor. I cannot be distracted with any other thing. But once you have qualified, then you are in a position to get involved in politics at your own expense. Not because when you are given a scholarship to study, you cannot use that time, which costs money to other people, to go get involved in something that is not what the money was given to you for. The scholarship was for me to study medicine, and I studied medicine.
And you graduated and opened a clinic. So, okay, now on that front, it was a success. So the next, we touched on your old party just now, Bersatu, and right now they're being investigated for having a lot of money in their bank accounts. I think it's best to let MACC investigate. And money politics is something that happened during your time, but also after. So moving forward, I am curious, would you support political parties having less assets and having to rely more on donations from individual members and not having large sums of money from corporations?
Well, currently, and for a long time, since even my time, a candidate can spend not more than 200,000 ringgit. And he has to submit, at the end of the election, he has to submit his accounts to the Suruhanjaya Pilihan Raya to show that he did not exceed the limit of money. But there is nothing said about the party. How much money can the party spend? There is no limit. So a party can spend $1 billion, or a party which has no money cannot ever win. That is something that needs to be corrected. I believe that even political parties must have a limit to the amount they can spend, and there must be a limit to the things they can do. For example, they put in millions of flags all over the country. It's not necessary. And they put on placards and pictures and all that. A lot of money was spent during election. Now it has come to a stage where if you don't have money, you lose the election. No matter how good you are, if you don't have money, you lose the election. So we need to limit the number of flags you use, the number of signboards, the number of meetings that you can have, public meetings and all that, so that everybody would be able to have sufficient ability or funds in order to carry out their campaign. At this moment, during the 15th election, I noticed that the amount of money spent by some parties was so big that you wonder, where do they get the money? And of course, that is the question that is being asked now.
So do you have any hypothesis on where they might have gotten the money?
Well, with regard to BN, Barisan National, the money came from Najib because he stole a lot of money. It's been proven in the court of law that he was stealing money, billions of dollars. So he can use the money to finance the party, to finance the election. The others, I know, for example, that there was terrible corruption on the part of ministers. What they did, it was that if there is a contract given out, the contractor must give them some money for the contract to be approved. So they make a lot of money that way. There are other ways they can raise money, not correctly, and mainly through abusing their position as ministers. So these are the sources of funds which are illegal. So if you have to limit the amount of money that you are allowed to spend by the party during election. Well, when people contribute money to political parties, they must do that openly. If they are able to hide, then some of the money may be stolen money. But if you have to declare the amount that you give, then of course people will know where the money comes from, and you may be investigated. But the most important thing is to limit the amount of money that each party can have. You cannot allow parties to have $1 billion. You know, I was shocked when I found one minister had $2 billion when he died. How did a minister gain $2 billion when business people also find it difficult to raise a few hundred million? But this minister had $2 billion. And another minister who lost $2 million said, oh, that's peanuts. So ministers should not have so much money. The money they have should come actually only from the salary. If there is any donation to the party, it must be received by the party and a receipt must be issued.
Also, a lot of times when you go in the media, especially in 2018 and 2020, is people are sort of trying to pit you against the Anwar Ibrahim, the current prime minister. So, sort of shifting gears, do you have one nice memory that you have with Anwar Ibrahim, or can you share something nice about the current prime minister?
Well, I was the one who actually brought him up. He was a youth leader outside any political system. So he applied to join UMNO. At that time, I was president of UMNO. Most people did not want him because they think that when he joins, he's going to go for the big post in the party. But I felt that he would be influential in giving, at that time, he looked like a very religious person, that he would introduce some good religious values to the party and to the government. So I admitted him into the party, subsequently appointed him as deputy minister. But of course, he was very unhappy about that. He said he should be minister. I had to point out to him that he's a newcomer to the party. There are lots of senior people who were not chosen as minister. But eventually, of course, he ended up as deputy prime minister. The moment I stepped down, he would be the prime minister. Unfortunately, he felt that I was overstaying my welcome as far as he is concerned. After 10 years, he didn't see me resigning. So he started a campaign against me, using other people to condemn me for being a dictator, corruption, cronyism, and all that. None of which was proven. But he went against me. But even then, I was quite prepared if he were to contest with me. But unfortunately, the police came up with some case which I cannot brush aside. I had to go according to the proper procedure as required by the law.